What if the biggest political battle in America right now isn't Democrats versus Republicans, but Democrats versus Democrats? This is exactly what is happening right now inside the Democratic Party. A large group of moderate Democrats in Congress, known as the New Democrat Coalition, has just unveiled a new immigration framework. According to the Associated Press, this proposal combines stricter border security with expanded legal pathways and a clearer process for those already in the country. On paper, it looks like a compromise. In reality, it is a political gamble because it challenges the party's traditional stance on immigration and forces Democrats to confront an uncomfortable question. Is their current approach to immigration still sustainable heading into the next election cycles? In the next few minutes, we will break down what this new plan really says, why it matters, and how it could reshape both the party and the national debate on immigration in ways that go far beyond the old labels of being either hard or soft on the border. Immigration has long been one of the most divisive issues in American politics. For decades, the debate has been framed as Republicans demanding tougher enforcement at the border, while Democrats push for more humane treatment and expanded opportunities for immigrants. This left-right contrast has dominated the national conversation. But the political reality has shifted. In recent years, the crisis at the southern border has intensified, with record numbers of arrivals and overwhelmed facilities. During the Biden administration, managing the surge proved difficult, with officials trying to balance enforcement with humanitarian obligations. Under President Trump now, pressure at the border remains high, and that is exactly why moderates are pushing to recalibrate the party's stance. As Pew Research noted in a 2024 survey, the majority of Americans, including many Democrats, now believe the situation at the border is either a crisis or a very serious problem. This pressure has opened space for moderates inside the Democratic Party to push for a new approach. The New Democrat Coalition, which includes more than 90 House Democrats, unveiled its framework in 2025, calling for more investment in border technology, more personnel for customs and border protection, and faster asylum processing times. At the same time, it seeks to expand legal immigration through additional work visas and create pathways for long-term residents without legal status to regularize their situation. According to Reuters, this is not yet a bill, but the coalition's goal is to shape the party's platform ahead of the 2026 midterms. In short, this is no longer just Democrats versus Republicans. This is Democrats arguing with each other about what their party should stand for. So what exactly are the moderates proposing? The framework has three main pillars, each of which is designed not just as policy, but as a political message. The first pillar is stronger border security. This means more than just adding agents at checkpoints. It includes deploying drones equipped with thermal cameras, installing high-tech sensors that can detect movement across wide stretches of terrain, and building more surveillance towers along the border. According to the Department of Homeland Security, these technologies have been tested in Arizona and parts of Texas, where they significantly increase detection rates. Supporters argue that without credible enforcement, any talk of immigration reform will be dismissed as unrealistic. They believe that voters in swing districts, many of whom see daily news images of overcrowded facilities and chaotic crossings, want to know that the government has control of the border before they are open to any new reforms. The second pillar is expanded legal immigration. The moderates argue that the U.S. economy depends heavily on immigrant labor, especially in sectors that face chronic worker shortages. For instance, the American Farm Bureau has warned that without seasonal migrant labor, crops in states like California and Florida would rot in the fields. Similarly, hospitals in rural areas often rely on foreign doctors and nurses to fill gaps in care. The framework proposes expanding the number of H-2A and H-2B visas for seasonal workers, as well as creating a new category of employment-based visa aimed at high-demand industries like technology and healthcare. By offering more legal pathways, the idea is to reduce the incentive for people to cross illegally, and instead channel them into regulated, documented systems. The third pillar focuses on regularizing the status of undocumented immigrants who have been in the United States for years, often raising families and contributing to their communities. According to the Migration Policy Institute, there are about 11 million undocumented immigrants in the country today, and nearly 2/3 have lived in the U.S. for over a decade. The moderates suggest prioritizing those with no criminal records and strong community ties, especially parents of U.S.-born children, for a path to legal residency. The plan stops short of promising automatic citizenship, but it frames legalization as a way to bring millions of people out of the shadows and integrate them into the formal economy. This three-part structure is not accidental. As Politico reported, the moderates believe that combining enforcement with opportunity gives Democrats the best chance of winning back the trust of skeptical voters in battleground states. In Arizona's 6th Congressional District, for example, Representative Juan Ciscomani, a Republican, won by a slim margin in 2022, largely by emphasizing border security. Moderates argue that unless Democrats can speak credibly on that issue, they will keep losing ground in districts like this. The cliffhanger is clear. If moderates are pushing this new line, what do progressives think? And how deep is the split inside the party? Progressives in Congress see the framework through an entirely different lens. For them, immigration is not just about controlling borders. It is about protecting human dignity and defending civil rights. They argue that every time Democrats lean into security, they validate the Republican narrative of fear, crisis, and invasion. According to NBC News, members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus immediately criticized the new framework, saying it repeats old mistakes of prioritizing enforcement while offering only watered-down protections. One of their core objections is the emphasis on surveillance technology. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has repeatedly argued that building more towers and flying more drones along the border does not solve the humanitarian crisis. Instead, she says, it often leads to more dangerous crossings as migrants are forced into remote areas where deaths from heat and dehydration rise. Advocacy groups such as Human Rights Watch have documented these risks, pointing out that since the mid-1990s, when border enforcement began to intensify, thousands of migrants have died trying to cross through deserts and rivers. Progressives say doubling down on this approach only guarantees more suffering. They also highlight the plight of dreamers, undocumented immigrants who were brought to the United States as children. Many of them grew up in American schools, speak fluent English, and consider the U.S. their only home. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, known as DACA, has protected some of them from deportation since 2012, but its future has been uncertain due to ongoing court battles. Progressives insist that any serious democratic framework must include permanent protections for dreamers. Leaving them out, they argue, is a betrayal of values. Furthermore, progressives warn that the moderate plan could alienate the very voters Democrats need to energize. Latino voters, who make up a growing share of the electorate in states like Nevada and Texas, may not respond positively to a message that emphasizes enforcement over compassion. Young voters, too, are overwhelmingly supportive of inclusive immigration policies. As one strategist told The Hill, if Democrats sound like Republicans on immigration, why should young people or immigrants' families show up to vote for them? The tension is not just theoretical. In 2020 and 2022, Democratic primaries in districts like Illinois' 3rd and New York's 14th showed a clear divide between establishment-backed moderates and progressive challengers who ran on pro-immigrant platforms. Some of those challengers won, reshaping the balance of power inside the party. Progressives now see the new framework as part of a broader fight over the soul of the Democratic Party. The danger, as one analyst put it in The Hill, is that Democrats may end up with a plan that satisfies no one. Too strict for progressives, too lenient for conservatives, and too complicated to rally behind. The question then becomes unavoidable. Who really sets the agenda of the Democratic Party? Is it the grassroots activists who mobilize and energize the base, or the swing district pragmatists whose seats often decide control of Congress? The stakes are not abstract, they are electoral. In the 2022 and 2024 cycles, Democrats barely held on in several key states. Immigration was a top issue in Arizona and Nevada, both of which Biden carried narrowly in 2020 and then struggled to defend in later contests. According to analysis from 538, suburban voters in these states consistently rank border control among their top concerns, even if they also support pathways for legal immigration. That is why moderates argue they need to recalibrate the message. If Democrats cannot reassure these voters that they take border security seriously, they risk losing their fragile coalition. But progressives counter that softening the message could depress turnout among the base, especially younger and minority voters. In Georgia, for example, higher youth turnout was decisive in 2020, and again in the Senate runoffs of 2021. The challenge is balancing two constituencies with very different priorities. As experts at the Brookings Institution point out, winning coalitions in American politics are often about addition, not subtraction. The cliffhanger is obvious. Can the Democrats walk this tightrope, or will the split-hand Republicans a new advantage? One of the most interesting aspects of the moderate proposal is that it tries to escape the old binary of being either hard or soft on immigration. For decades, Republicans branded themselves as the party of toughness at the border, while Democrats leaned on compassion and reform. The moderate framework attempts to blend both. By combining stricter enforcement with legal pathways, it presents itself as pragmatic rather than ideological. As explained by the Washington Post, the coalition insists this is not Trump-style enforcement, but a realistic acknowledgement of voter concerns. At the same time, they reject the idea of open borders, which no major Democratic figure actually supports, but which has become a common talking point in conservative media. This middle ground approach could, in theory, broaden the party's appeal, but it carries serious risks. It could alienate progressives who see it as a betrayal, and it may not convince conservatives who want even harsher measures. In other words, the plan could end up being a political no man's land. Yet if it works, it could redefine the immigration debate for years. The cliffhanger is sharp. Could this new approach become the blueprint for U.S. immigration? Or will it collapse under the weight of party infighting? To fully understand why this debate matters, we need to place it in the broader context of American politics. Immigration has historically been an issue that shapes national identity. From the Ellis Island era in the early 1900s to the immigration reforms of the 1960s and the controversies over illegal crossings in the 1990s, each generation has fought over who gets to be American and under what conditions. Today, the United States is experiencing demographic shifts that make this debate even more central. According to the Census Bureau, by 2045, the country is projected to become majority-minority, meaning no single ethnic group will make up over 50% of the population. This demographic reality is part of what fuels both political polarization and the urgency of immigration policy. Moderates argue that if Democrats want to remain competitive nationally, they must adapt to these shifts with policies that reassure skeptical voters while still welcoming new Americans. Progressives counter that the party's long-term survival depends on inspiring the next generation of voters, many of whom are children of immigrants and strongly support inclusive policies. This tension reflects a deeper question. Is immigration policy about short-term electoral math, or about long-term values? Even if the Democrats agreed on a framework, turning it into law would be a monumental challenge. Immigration reform has failed repeatedly in Congress over the past 2 decades. The last major attempt in 2013, known as the Gang of Eight bill, collapsed in the House despite bipartisan support in the Senate. According to the Congressional Research Service, the main obstacle has always been reconciling enforcement with legalization measures. The moderate framework faces the same hurdle. Republicans are unlikely to support expanded legal pathways without even harsher enforcement, and progressives are unlikely to support tougher enforcement without stronger protections for migrants. That leaves moderates walking a very narrow path. Legal challenges could also emerge, especially regarding the use of surveillance technology and constitutional protections for asylum seekers. As the American Civil Liberties Union has often argued, enforcement measures that rely heavily on surveillance can raise privacy concerns and face court challenges. The cliffhanger remains. Will this framework ever make it past the talking stage, or is it destined to join the long list of failed immigration reforms? Let us recap. Moderates in the Democratic Party are pushing a new immigration framework that mixes tougher border security with expanded legal pathways. They believe this is the only way to win over swing voters in states like Arizona and Nevada. Progressives fiercely oppose it, arguing it betrays democratic values and risks alienating the party's base. The electoral stakes are high, and the broader context of demographic change makes the debate even more urgent. The reflections are clear. This fight is not just about policy. It is about the identity and future direction of the Democratic Party. The decision they make will shape not only their chances in 2026, but the way Americans talk about immigration for years to come. So here's the big question. Do you think the Democratic Party should adopt a tougher line on immigration? Or should it stick to its progressive roots? Your opinion matters, because the party itself is still deciding its path. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you want to keep following how this debate unfolds, make sure you subscribe to Capital Chronicle. We will be tracking every twist in this story, because what Democrats decide inside their own house could end up redefining the national debate on immigration for years to come.